Welcome to the Missouri First Steps Early Intervention presentation about the online system for provider mileage. The information shared in this presentation became effective July 1, 2017. This presentation is an overview as indicated in the Service Provider Manual, Chapter 10 for Mileage and Travel Incentive. The key topics to review include mileage guidelines, provider mileage entry, finalizing mileage, and mileage payments. Chapter 10 is available on the DESE website at the link indicated on the bottom of the slide. State regulations for First Steps allow providers to be paid mileage. Mileage reimbursement is optional. Providers are not required to utilize mileage reimbursement. However, should providers choose reimbursement, then state guidelines must be followed. State guidelines include the following. Mileage is allowed for First Steps direct services, including evaluation and assessment. Mileage is allowed for IFSP meetings and EIT meetings. Providers are reimbursed per the state mileage rate schedule for allowable First Steps activities. Current information may be found at the link at the bottom of the screen. Providers must maintain sufficient documentation to substantiate payment for mileage. Documentation is maintained by the individual provider in a daily mileage log. The log records the details of the visit, including the child's name, date the service was delivered or the meeting was held, the location, and number of miles. Also, each payee submits a monthly mileage for payment of the total mileage traveled each month. Mileage reimbursement is for the most direct route from the official domicile or starting point to the destination. A provider can only claim mileage for early intervention services delivered in the family's natural environment. Providers must maintain a daily mileage log. DESE provides a sample log as shown on the slide. The daily log is a requirement with the use of the online mileage system. The log may be found at the link at the bottom of the screen. Let's take a look at an overview of the online mileage system. All providers are able to enter mileage information. The entry can be daily, weekly, monthly, or however you're used to tracking your mileage. Each provider's mileage entry will need to be submitted for payment one time per provider per month. For providers to enter multiple entries, the mileage entries will be compiled into one submission for payment each month. For agencies, mileage can be entered by either the individual provider or the agency administrator. Mileage must be submitted on the provider level. Then the agency submits the mileage for payment. So if you are an agency and your providers submit their mileage with their claim information, you can enter both claim and mileage information at the same time if you choose. This means you no longer have to wait for all agency providers to turn in their mileage in order to submit for payment. The agency can determine when to submit monthly mileage for each provider. For example, if you know Joe's mileage is complete, but you're still waiting on Susie's to be submitted, you can go ahead and submit Joe's mileage and then submit Susie's when you have all of her information. For independent providers, these providers have the capability to enter both the mileage and submit the payment. Again, the same rule will apply. You are only able to submit mileage one time per month for payment. This screen displays how to access the online mileage system. Logging in as a provider in WebSpo, go to the Provider Account Management tab at the top of the screen, and then select Provider Mileage from the drop-down box. Once provider mileage is selected, the main way to navigate through the provider mileage screen is via the navigation bar. There are three main pages on the online mileage system: the provider list, the provider mileage entry, and mileage summary. This screen displays what appears when you select the provider list. On this page, an independent provider can view his or her own status. Agencies can view a list of all active providers and the status of their mileage submission. Therefore, this is an important menu for agencies. Also on this page, the system displays a 4-month period, which gives providers sufficient time to submit mileage within 60 days from the date a service was delivered. Providers cannot enter mileage for any month outside of this 4-month period. If a past month no longer appears in the 4-month period, then mileage cannot be submitted. For example of how to utilize this page, let's look at the line with Claire. You can see that her mileage is finalized as indicated by the green check mark. This means mileage has been submitted for Claire for payment and no longer can be modified. However, Rochelle, Emmy, and Brittany all have mileage in process for the month. This means that their mileage is still pending, so additional mileage may be entered or saved, and edits can be made to the mileage entries. All of the providers showing with no icon in the month column do not have any mileage data entered yet for the month. If you select the View Entry link, you can navigate to the provider mileage entry page for that particular provider. This screen displays what appears when you select View Entry from the provider list for Emmy. This screen will also display if you select Provider Mileage Entry List at any time. The provider whose entries you viewed will appear on the page. For agencies, the system also allows you to search for a specific provider or a date range if you were searching for mileage for a specific time period. For agencies, mileage may be entered by the individual provider or the agency administrator. Please contact your agency administrator if you are unsure how mileage is entered for your company. From this screen, there will be 2 options for mileage. The provider or the agency administrator can enter new mileage using the Add Mileage button as shown at the top of the screen, or Edit Pending Mileage. Mileage that is pending and editable appears in the status column with Open. You can double-click on the line to view or edit the mileage record. If mileage is closed, you can view finalized mileage from this screen. This screen displays what appears when you select Add Mileage button. This button allows the provider to enter a new mileage record. Remember, mileage may be added on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, as long as both the start date and the end date are in the same month. First, enter the start date and the end date for mileage. This date cannot be a future date, and it cannot be a date in the past that's greater than the 4 months. Second, enter the total number of miles traveled for the date range entered. Finally, save the entry. Then the entry will appear in the list as editable or open until the mileage for this provider is finalized. This screen displays what appears when you double-click on a line in the mileage entry list with the status of open. This allows the user to edit any mileage pending submission. Once open, you can change the start date, the end date, and the number of miles, or the reason for travel. You can also delete the record if it was entered in error. This screen displays what appears when you double-click on a line in the mileage entry list with the status of closed. The user can view past, finalized, or expired mileage. You can double-click on the line item to view the start date, end date, mileage, and any reason for travel that was previously entered. No edits or modifications are allowed once the status is closed. This screen displays what appears if you select Provider Mileage Summary. The Provider Mileage Summary table lists miles, summaries for each provider, and the mileage month. This table displays the status of each mileage transaction. From this table, agencies or independent providers can finalize the mileage and view payment status or history of each transaction. In the center of the page, you'll see a column that reads Select to Finalize. This is a checkbox, and you select the checkbox, you will finalize the mileage and the submission is complete. The date will appear in the corresponding column for Date Finalized to indicate that mileage has been finalized and can no longer be edited. You can also see the checkboxes or No Longer Displays as an option to check once the mileage is finalized. Agencies or independent providers can finalize mileage on the Provider Mileage Summary page in WebSpo. Finalizing mileage locks in the monthly mileage amount to be paid on the next check run. Agencies can determine how provider mileage is finalized to fit the agency's process as long as it is submitted within the 4-month period. For example, if an agency prefers that all mileage for the month of July is paid in the same check, the agency can wait and finalize all July mileage at the same time. However, if the agency prefers you can finalize mileage as it's completed by each provider, the only stipulation is there is only one monthly submission per provider per month, and it must be submitted within the 4-month period. Very important, once you finalize the provider's mileage for that month and it's submitted for payment, the mileage cannot be edited or modified in any way. If a provider entered mileage but did not submit the mileage for payment in time, that is within the 4-month period, then the mileage expires. Expired mileage cannot be submitted for payment. For example, mileage traveled in July was entered but not finalized by October, which is the end of the 4-month period. Therefore, the July mileage expired. This mileage is still viewable in the provider mileage entry list with a closed status, but it cannot be finalized or modified in any way. Now we'll review the mileage payment process. Once a provider's mileage is finalized, it is included in the next check run for payment. The payee can locate the mileage payment in WebSpo under Transactions in the Payment tab of Billing Detail or in the Explanation of Payments under Transactions. For agencies, the payment amount is a tally of all mileage submitted within the check run period. For example, an agency has 5 providers who submit mileage for August and 2 providers who submit mileage for July. 2 transactions would appear in the next check run. One would show ABC agency mileage for August in the amount of $1,500. The other transaction would show ABC agency mileage for the month of July in the amount of $500. A Reports tab is available for all users, including independent providers and agencies. This is an important function for agencies to obtain a detailed description of the mileage for each provider under this Reports tab. There are 3 mileage reports available. The mileage payment detail lists the monthly mileage totals by provider for a selected payment date. Mileage entries by month lists all provider mileage entries for a selected mileage month. And expired mileage, which lists providers who entered a mileage record and the entry was not finalized by the submission deadline. A final reminder, the Service Provider Manual Chapter 10, Mileage and Travel Incentive, contains more information on the First Steps activities applicable to mileage reimbursement, mileage documentation, and online submission for payment. Chapter 10 is available on the DESE website at the link available on your screen. All providers are encouraged to review this chapter to ensure provider billing practices are in accordance with the current guidance. Thank you for participating in this presentation about the online mileage system for First Step services. If you have any questions, please contact the number or email on the screen.